On June 2nd, 1932, in the heart of the Great Depression, a young man named George Perry claimed to land a 22-pound, 4-ounce largemouth bass from a small lake in Georgia. That single fish would go on to become the most legendary catch in bass fishing history, and for over 9 decades, it's remained untouched, even after a bigger bass was caught in 2009. But what if the most famous record in fishing is fake? One of the greatest bass fishing historians of all times thinks so, and today we will dive deeper into that catch and much more.
There's no way that fish, well, first of all, I believe that fish is a fraud. I used to be a lawyer. There's a saying in Latin, faults in one, faults in all.
All right, well, welcome back to the Bass Juice podcast. We have taken a serious break over here, I think well over a year, CJ.
Yep, a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm so excited to get back, especially to kick it off with Ken Duke.
Yes, absolutely. Ken Duke is, if there's, I don't think there's anyone who knows more about the bass fishing industry than Ken Duke. Would you agree?
I agree.
Yeah.
And I'm a little, looking over the syllabus, I'm like, all right, this is going to be a little more academic, instead of flipping jigs and bushes and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. No,
but
I think
it's going to be good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's going to be good. I know a topic that Ken Duke knows not only a lot about, but I think that he actually enjoys as well, is talking a little bit about the world record bass. I think we're going to go ahead and kick it off, bring Ken Duke right on in. Ken, how's it going, sir?
It's going great, guys. And CJ, a little credit, man. I like to flip jigs and bushes too. One of my favorite things to do.
Yes. I don't think anyone doesn't like flipping a jig in a bush.
There's just nothing about feeling that thump. And
yes.
Oh. Although I'll say I live in Central Florida, guys, so I'm a lot more often flipping a small creature bait into a patch of matted hydrilla. So that's more what I do these days.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. But one of the first things, I really wanted to get you on the show just because of your knowledge of not only bass fishing, but specifically around the world record bass. And, one of the biggest things, I kind of know at a little bit about, but I really wanted to hear your take on it. If you look at the world record books, from what I see, there's a tie there at the biggest world record. We know with basically 2 fish, but one technically weighs a little bit more. But I would just love to hear your input. Why is there a tie when it comes to the world record?
Well, Tyler, your timing is amazing because there's no longer a tie.
Oh, really?
Only very recently, just in the last couple months, a lot has happened in the last, say, 18 months in the bass fishing and bass biology and bass genetics world. A little less than 2 years ago, a geneticist at, I believe it was Yale University, named Michael Kim, because technology is always improving, he has decided that there is a significant genetic difference between, we've known this to a degree, between the Florida bass, which previously was known as Micropterus salmoides floridanus, and the largemouth bass, which previously was known as Micropterus salmoides. And that started a big turmoil. And the American Fisheries Society, I apologize for getting into the weeds here, gentlemen. The American Fisheries Society, which is the organization that kind of oversees the nomenclature of these fish scientifically and the scientific names, which are invariably Latin or variations on Latin. And they decided that, okay, you can divide the American Fisheries Society on some level between the guys who think that we should divide these species up as much as possible, and I'll call them splitters, and the guys who think, that's just too esoteric. The people out there actually catching these fish can't tell the difference. Why are we doing that? And I would classify those people as lumpers. Okay, here's where it gets ugly, potentially even stupid. The major record-keeping organization, which is the International Game Fish Association down in Dania Beach, Florida. I just got this in the mail today. It's the latest world record book for 2025. They have decided to go along with these new scientific developments coming out of the American Fisheries Society. And they've decided that no longer are they going to treat the Florida bass and the northern largemouth as the same thing. They're now going to treat them as separate records. They're going to have a Florida largemouth record. That fish is now going to be known as Micropterus salmoides. And they're going to have a northern largemouth record. That fish is now going to be known as Micropterus nigricans. New nomenclature, new verbiage. And because I suspected that the Manabu Kurita fish from 2009, Lake Biwa, Japan, had to be a Florida bass, just had to be a Florida bass to be that big. And I knew where that fish was kept. And I've got some friends in the biology community, and myself and a couple of those biologist geneticist friends, Josh Sackmar from Titan Bass in South Georgia, and Stephen Barden, who's a private biologist, but also the biologist for Major League Fishing, we got together and we decided we're going to get a sample of that fish, which is owned by Skeeter Yamaha, and we're going to have it tested. And we did, and it came back as 99 point something % Florida bass. So now, it happened so late it didn't make this book. But if you go to their website, you will see there is now a Florida bass record that belongs to Manabu Kurita at 22 pounds, 4.97 ounces. And there is a largemouth bass record that belongs to George Perry and has belonged to George Perry basically since the 1930s at 22 pounds, 4 ounces. So the tie is no more. There are now two different divisions of largemouth bass, if you will, in the record books. It remains to be seen what the freshwater fish group does. They're another minor record-keeping organization. But this has been a lot of turmoil. Josh Sackmar and I did a 3-part series in Bassmaster magazine about it. It's kind of a mess, but it's interesting.
Now I got to ask you, because you talked really specifically about the northern bass and the Florida bass, and I guess I was always under kind of the assumption that like the biggest bass in between those two was actually the mix between them, which I always heard was like an H1 or whatever it may be. So as far as that goes, does that mean that, like, is that a Florida bass? Is that a northern bass? Like, is that a whole nother classification? How's that work?
Tyler, you're opening up Pandora's box right now. I think the latest genetic information and studies that guys like Josh Sackmar are doing is they are saying that the fish that has the greatest propensity for maximum growth and reach the highest weights is actually a pure Florida. But for many years, people thought it was what was known as an F1, the first generation intergrade between the largemouth and the Florida. But I believe Josh's information, his work shows that a pure Florida grows the biggest. Now, we say pure Florida, and those fish don't start simply at the state line. Those fish actually run up through peninsular Florida, through Georgia along the coastal areas, into the Carolinas, and maybe as far as into Virginia, where you can encounter some pure Florida bass. But that's it. But of course, pure Floridas are widely transplanted. Back in the 50s and 60s, and even to this day, California, Arizona, Texas, Louisiana, a lot of others, Mississippi, all of these states have received pure Florida bass through the years. And an interesting thing that Stephen Barden told me, I hope I'm getting this right, for a long time, Major League Fishing was taking a scale sample from every fish caught in MLF Bass Pro Tour level competitions that weighed more than 7 pounds. All of those fish had some Florida genetics. Even the fish caught out of like Lake of the Ozarks or Table Rock Lake in Missouri, all of those fish had at least a little bit of Florida genetics. And how it got there, on some level, nobody knows.
So would a pure Florida largemouth is like 100%? What's the percentages of, like, what makes it an actual pure Florida? And also,
CJ, you guys are just...
How in the world did one end up in Japan?
Oh, well, I can get to that one easy.
Okay.
But let's go back to to what makes a pure Florida. Here's the problem on that. Different states, different organizations, different biological communities all have different standards. So this is a cluster, followed by, the word. This is an absolute cluster. And there is no uniformity in how these different organizations look at it. Some states will begin, some states at the state level will start recognizing a Florida bass record, a northern largemouth record, and so forth. And they will have different standards than other groups. Now, the Kurita fish tested out at better than 99% Florida. And I suppose it is possible to have a 100% Florida bass. Not far from where I live in the Orlando area, there is the Florida Bass Conservation Center, where they're trying to maintain the genetic integrity of these fish and make sure that we have the native fish for this area. And also, they're when these fish are transplanted other places, they want to make sure that those fish are genetically what they're supposed to be. Now, CJ, you asked a great question. How did a Florida bass get to Japan? Well, bass have been stocked in Japan since the late 19th century, early 20th century. There were a lot of them stocked during World War II and shortly after by American service groups who wanted to have something they could go out there and catch. In the 1980s, a gentleman who works in the fishing industry named Hiro Naito, Japanese guy who worked for Pradco for a long time. He was the guy who really opened up the Japanese market to American tackle. And he still lives not very far from me. Wonderful gentleman, recently retired from Pradco. But in the 80s, he got to work on the prospect of transplanting pure Florida bass, which by then everybody knew those were the ones that grow big. Transplanting Florida bass to Japan. And Jim Bagley of Bagley Bait Company paid to have several thousand fish transferred to Japan, where they were stocked in several bodies of water, Ikehara, Biwa, some others. And they've grown to gigantic proportions, including 22 pounds, 5 ounces.
Wow.
You guys are right in my wheelhouse. I love this.
Yeah. I was just thinking while you were talking about this is that you talked about how these Florida bass have been transported all over really the world at this point now. But it seems like the Florida bass you would think, if anything, the Florida bass would get the biggest in Florida, like in its home place. But it seems like every time it's transplanted elsewhere, California, Japan, Texas, it seems like it gets bigger outside of Florida. So I ask you, is there a reason for that? Do you think it has something to do with food or growing seasons or anything like that?
I think it has a lot to do with food. And although we say it grows bigger other places, I'm not sure I'm on board with that quite, Tyler. It has certainly gotten bigger in California. It has gotten bigger or as big in Japan, but there are some really reliable reports of 20-pound fish in Florida, including some fish that would weigh more than 22 pounds, 5 ounces, if you want to go way back. What happens, though, and I apologize for not being a biologist and not having a more articulate answer, but what happens is when you introduce a new fish to an environment he hasn't lived in before, he may have some significant predatory advantages. And for example, in California, the places where the Florida bass grew gigantic, in most cases, had rainbow trout that were being stocked there for decades. And a largemouth bass in a still water environment is a way better thing than a rainbow trout. A rainbow trout's just a little protein bar, or as Bill Siementhal likes to call them, vitamin T. Lake Biwa in Japan is also a two-story fishery. So the largemouth in each of those waters, you got stripers, maybe you might even have some big brown trout, but for the most part, the largemouth is the top of the predator list there. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot getting after him, and he's got an incredible amount of things that he can chase down and eat. I mean, imagine a trout, once the water starts to get into the high 60s, he ain't moving very good, and a largemouth's right at his peak.
Yeah.
Is it at Lake Biwa? Is that all trout stock too, or?
Yeah, well, it's a two-story fishery. I'm not sure they have to stock them there. They just survive there and are able to procreate. So I think that's it there. And of course, as you guys know so well, in Japan, the bass is called an enemy fish. It's an invasive species, and there are very strict regulations on them. And for the most part, if you catch a largemouth in Japan, you're supposed to kill it. I think there are some exceptions made for guides, and those things are slippery. So a lot of guys get out there and they're trying desperately to kill that fish, but oops, it slipped back into the lake where it lives to be caught again.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I guess what I was really saying is that I feel like you don't see the teener fish as much in Florida, maybe than you used to, than you do like when they're in Texas or other fisheries. I feel like every time they go to Florida every single year. And yet most of the time the big bass, I mean, and it's partly the fisheries that they go to are super pressured, but the big bass in them is like, 10, 11 pounds, but you don't hear of I feel like the 14, 15, 16 pounders, which is not that that's a common fish anywhere. But it seems like when you do hear about them right now, it's mostly around Texas, maybe a little bit on Biwa, but.
No, you're right. First thing I would say is if you talk about the teeners being caught, if you're talking about tournaments, in BASS history, I think there have only been 2 fish over 13 and a half pounds caught.
Wow.
And maybe only 3 or 4 over 13 caught in 800 BASS tournaments since 1967. So those guys are simply not fishing for those fish. They're trying to catch 4 and 5 pounders for the most part. But yeah, Texas has done a lot to try to advance that. Share Lunker is Texas's best marketing program for fishing. It has brought a lot of people to there. Forward-facing sonar in the hands of a guy like a Josh Jones is next level. I mean, that guy's now caught hundreds of 10-pound plus fish there because he's so good with forward-facing sonar. And we're learning that giant fish are sometimes out there roaming it seemingly aimlessly.
Yeah.
And so he's just a master at targeting those fish. There are still quite a few giant bass caught in Florida. If you could check the trophy catch records online, and you can see that every year there are 13-pound plus fish caught here. And Florida is doing some things to try to increase the trophy production in the state. For example, not a lot of people know this, just in the last couple of years, the Florida Freshwater Fish Commission has started stocking rainbow trout, of all things, in some Florida waters. And rainbows don't live once the temperature reaches about 70 degrees, they die. But what FWC has learned from tagging some of these fish is they don't die from the heat. They're eaten well before that.
Interesting. And why not give them a big protein snack to get a little bit bigger?
And specifically, what lakes were those?
Well, probably the best trophy bass lake in Florida for producing 10-pounders is a lake up in northeast Florida called Kingsley. And it's perfectly round. Probably the oldest lake in Florida. They believe it was created by a meteor strike. It looks like somebody took an ice cream cone and jammed it in the sand. It's just like this, the topography. And it's 90 feet deep, and there's almost no water. It might be the deepest lake in Florida.
Wow.
But anyway, they're stocking them there. They're stocking them in some other North Florida lakes, maybe Orange. I can't remember. But they're not making a secret of it. I mean, you can find out where they're putting these things and go out there and throw a big old rainbow trout pencil popper.
Yeah. That's actually that style of lake you just do not see. I've had the privilege of fishing in Florida a lot, and you don't see that style of lake. You just said like a ice cream cone that's 90 foot deep. You really don't see that a whole lot. But I got to think when you were talking there, I just realized that you said that George Perry's fish is considered a northern fish, or not a northern, but it's considered a largemouth. So in that case, do you think, I feel like that will never be broken at all.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's an injustice.
Yeah.
Because there's no way that fish, well, first of all, I believe that fish is a fraud.
We'll go into that a little bit. Go into that a little bit.
Okay. George Perry allegedly caught this fish in 1932 during the depth of the Great Depression. He was a poor 20-year-old farm boy. His dad had died the year before. Times were tough. He had sisters. He had a mom. He's sharecropping on this farm in South Georgia, and money's tight. So we see that the economic circumstances are there for somebody to want to to do something, maybe even do something a tad desperate. Field and Stream magazine, and I could pull out the exact issue that would have been on the newsstands at that time. Field and Stream magazine was offering prizes for big fish being caught, and they had done this since 1911. And that year, the prize for biggest bass would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of $75 of product. But $75 worth of product in 1932 would be about $1,500 today.
Wow.
And that would have been worth somebody maybe doing something they should have regretted. So Perry goes out and he catches this 22-pound 4-ounce fish, which at the time would not have been the world record. The world record at that moment was 24 pounds. A fish caught in the Tombigbee River in Alabama that was later established to be an absolute fraud. And not only that, but also a striped bass as well. But anybody who was paying attention to such things at the time would have had every reason to believe that the world record was 24 pounds out of Alabama. So Perry goes out there and claims 22.4. Big enough to win the contest, not so big as to raise massive suspicions about it being a world record or not. Then lo and behold, after Perry catches this fish, the Alabama fish is disqualified and discredited, and boom, by 1934, Perry is the world record holder. And in 1934, he won the Field and Stream contest again with this bass. I apologize for the glare, gentlemen. This is a picture that I got from the Heinzerling family, who used to be part owners of the Creek Chub Bait Company, which made the lure that Perry claimed he caught the world record on.
Is that the actual photo?
This is the actual photo. I have the actual photo. Every time you've seen this photo in print, it's somebody borrowing it from me. This is it. There's George Perry's handwriting on the back. This is one of my prized pieces of memorabilia. So this is the 1934 winner. This fish allegedly weighed 13 pounds, 14 ounces. But there's a problem. That tackle box, which I have another one just like it, is a Kennedy model something. That tackle box is 21 inches long. That fish is less than 21 inches long, and he's saying it's a shade under 14 pounds. And he's sitting well back of it. He's he's crouching well back of it. I don't have photographic evidence to tell you that George Perry was lying about his 1932 fish, but he damn well was lying about this fish.
Yes.
And I used to be a lawyer. There's a saying in Latin that basically means false in one, false in all. And that's what I tend to think of Perry. If Perry was cheating here, and I feel like I can prove that, why should I believe he was on the up and up in 1932?
Yeah.
Other things that trouble me about the 1932 fish is that the second biggest bass ever caught in Georgia history was 18 pounds, 1 ounce. That's a 4+ pound difference.
Yep.
You don't see a gap like that in state records. You just don't. Perry was a liar and a cheat, and we've suffered under that for now 93 years, almost to the day. The anniversary of his catch is coming up on June 2nd.
Oh, wow. Which also...
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, side note, a June 2nd bass weighing the biggest ever also seems a little fishy. I mean, I feel like if they're going to be caught and they're going to be that fat, you would think it might be more of that pre-spawn type fish, but I guess.
That's a great point. But you know what? The biwa fish, Manabu Kurita's fish at 22.5 was caught on June 9th.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So David Hayes, world record smallmouth, caught in early July.
Okay.
Yeah, but what a lot of people don't realize about the Perry fish, the season was closed in Georgia until June 1st. They were trying to protect spawning fish even then.
Wow.
But anyway, I just think Perry was a cheat.
Yeah.
One of these days, gentlemen, I'm going to take him down.
Now, real quick, if you guys would like to help support this channel and help us bring more Bass Juice podcasts to you, then please consider checking out Fin Fishing for all of your fishing apparel needs. Whether that is a USA-made sun shirt to help protect you from the sun, maybe it's a waterproof hat, maybe it's a pair of shorts, some sun gloves, some rod socks, you can find it all at Fin Fishing. And right now, if you use the coupon code BJP10, you can get 10% off your order. So I'm going to leave some links down below in the description. Thank you for all of you who have shopped at Fin Fishing in the past. I kind of somewhat remember when the Manabu's fish was caught. And I do remember there was like a little bit of, I don't know if it was drama or what it was, but I remember there was like some speculation of I think it was the bridge that he had caught it on. Do you remember that? I'm sure you do.
Yes, I sure do. Yeah, I was really privileged. I got to break that story in the U.S. I was working for BASS at the time, and I got contacted by somebody out of Japan about that fish. And yeah, the controversy was you weren't supposed to tie off to that bridge, something like that, and there was issues about whether that was a permitted fishing location. But Kurita was clean on all of that. He didn't violate any rules. He did catch it on a bluegill, but that was a legal bait. Would not necessarily be a legal bait in every state here in the U.S. because a bluegill is a game fish. But he was totally legit, and he went above and beyond in filling out his application for world record status with the International Game Fish Association. He went out on his own, and the Japanese Game Fish Association set up for him to do a polygraph, which he passed with flying colors. And the president of IGFA at the time told me that Kurita's application was the cleanest they had ever seen.
That's awesome. I think I remember too about
That's
that.
The guy who should have it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Didn't he say, I want to say that he said something about that wasn't even the biggest fish that he had seen on that, maybe on that day or maybe ever. I don't remember.
Yeah, he said he said that fish was part of a wolf pack of 5 or 6 or 8 bass, and he said it was the smallest one.
Holy cow.
Said if that fish didn't make it as a world record, he said felt like he could go out and break the record the next week.
Really? I'm sure he tried again.
I'm sure he did. Yeah, he has since gone out and caught fish over 18.
Really?
He's not to be trifled with. That guy can catch big fish.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, do you think that Biwa, or do you think there's other places, do you think that is the only lake that may have the potential to be where the next world record is caught, or where do you think it could possibly happen?
Well, that's such a tough question, Tyler. I think there are other fish out there that exceed. Well, now to break the record, you've got to exceed it by 2 ounces. If the current record in a classification is in a species classification is under 25 pounds, you have to break it by 2 ounces to be considered free and clear and a world record. That's why Kurita and Perry were tied for 12 or 13 years, was because Kurita only beat him by slightly under an ounce. I think Biwa is probably a decent pick. I'm all the time hearing people tell me about South Africa as a place where there are giant fish. And I've got friends who've gone to South Africa and caught giant fish, but nothing bigger than the low teens. The giants in California seem to have disappeared. A couple years ago, I did a story for a magazine, and I had occasion to call several California fisheries biologists, and I said, hey, is there a world record swimming in California? And they all said no. The problem there is not habitat, and it's not genetics, it's food. There are very few rainbow trout being stocked in those lakes that turned out the giants in years past, like Casitas, Castaic, Dixon, Spring, because rainbow trout are an invasive species in those waters, so they don't want to stock invasive species. I've got friends telling me that they have people they know who are still stocking trout in private waters, and so we may have somebody growing a world record right now who is completely off the radar.
Wow. I kind of wondered about that, especially with today's age and today's money, if that wouldn't be the next world record of someone who has because I think some of those lakes in California where some of the big ones were being caught, they weren't all that big, right? Like Dixon and all those, I think they were pretty small, weren't they?
Dixon's like 75 acres.
Oh, wow.
75 acres. Castaic and Casitas, those are lakes that are a couple thousand acres.
Yeah.
These are small bodies of water. And so you could stock them with other things relatively inexpensively because you didn't need tens of thousands of fish to roll out there. But they were also heavily monitored with regard to fishing. Like you couldn't fish out there 7 days a week. Most of those lakes you could only fish 2 or 3 days a week. And then they were limiting the number of boats that would get out there. The guys who are serious would line up at the gate at night, a day or many hours before the gates would open. Dixon, which is where Dottie lived and eventually grew to 25 pounds and 1 ounce in 2005, I guess it was. You couldn't even launch a private boat there. You had to use one of the aluminum John boats. You had to bring your own trolling motor and battery, but you couldn't launch your own boat. And there were a limited number of park run John boats out there. So those kind of fisheries are basically exist few and far between. I hope that window hasn't closed for California. I hope that window will reopen so Florida can get on the board with a world record. People from Texas don't like me, but I don't want them to break the record, and I don't think they will anytime soon. You know, their biggest fish is still 4 pounds plus off the world record mark. They, 35 years ago, you had Texas officials saying, "Oh, we're going to break the record in 5 years. I guarantee it." Well, that was 30 years ago, and they haven't increased their state record by 1 ounce in that period. So I don't think they're going to get there.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wonder, is there an alternative to rainbow trout that provides, soft rays, eat it from the head tail, enough protein? What would be an alternative, stocker?
Yeah, there are some other things that occur naturally in these bodies of water, so you don't get so much trouble by trying to stock them. But golden shiners are pretty good. Shad are pretty good, but they're small. Gizzard shad are good and larger. So there are some other alternatives. Crawfish are not a great alternative because it takes a lot of energy to digest that shell on a crawfish. And I'm no biologist again, but it's tough to beat a rainbow trout. A rainbow trout is just seriously, it is a protein candy bar right there. Yeah. It's a Snickers.
They taste better than a shad too.
Yeah,
I know.
They may, yeah. They may. My wife is Japanese, and we go to Japan occasionally, and I take great joy in eating shad sushi.
Yeah.
Tastes a lot like mackerel for anybody who wants to try something comparable that's easier to find.
Yeah. Well, I got to ask you about one more fish, especially since you're the big fish expert. And I had remembered part of this, but I was actually listening to part of your guys's your podcast last night. For those of you guys don't know, Ken hosts his own podcast after what's it called again? Bass After Dark. Yep, and it was a pretty cool. I got to listen to a little bit of that. Yeah, I got to listen to a little bit of the episode last night, and you guys were talking about who's the GOAT of big bass fishing, which obviously Mike Long isn't on that list any longer. But you guys did mention a fish that Paul Duclos, I believe, caught. That was a 24-pounder. And I had remember seeing that, but I didn't really remember that whole story. So I just wondered if you could say or touch on that a little bit.
Sure. And I wish I had all the details for you, but back in 1997, Paul Duclos caught a fish from Spring Lake in California, another one of these small lakes, couple 100 acres tops, and he was throwing a big swim bait, and he was fishing from a dock on the lake, and he catches this indisputably big bass. This is a big fish, and he doesn't have a good handheld scale or anything like that, and he doesn't want to kill the fish, so he's not going to take it and throw it in his car and go up the road to the market and get it weighed on certified scales. So he decides he's going to call his wife and ask her to bring the bathroom scales down to the lake. So he steps on the bathroom scales and gets a number. Then he takes the fish and steps on the bathroom scales again and claims the number is 24 pounds more. And he seriously considered submitting that for record certification to IGFA. I think he ultimately decided better of that at some point. And I don't think he actually submitted it, but they would not have taken it terribly seriously. I mean, we've all stood on those old spring-style bathroom scales, and first thing you realize is, oh, if I tilt my body this way, I'm actually slim and trim. And if I go the other way, I'm a fat pig. So at least that's my experience. But he got beat up a lot about that. I think the quickest way to be called a liar is to catch a big fish,
or maybe even win a tournament these days at times.
Oh yeah, yeah. Then you're a cheater and a liar and terrible.
Yeah, it does sound. I listened to that part on your guys' podcast last night. How a little bit toxic that, especially the like big bass hunters, which I don't feel like we have too many of those like it was in California in the 90s and maybe even early 2000s when you had a lot of those big bass. But that just people, if you catch a big one, it's automatically like he did it illegally or he cheated or whatever.
Sketchy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're spot on the timing as well. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was an organization called the Big Bass Record Club, and they had a bounty on the fish backed up by a Lloyd's of London insurance policy, and the bounty peaked at $8 million. If you caught a bass, here's the irony of it all. If you caught a bass that would certified as the world record by IGFA, then they would hand you $8 million. But here's the ugly catch-22 part. IGFA won't certify a fish as a world record if you're getting paid a bounty on that fish. So I don't know how that would have worked out. It never transpired, of course, although Bob Krupe came crazy close one time with a 22.01 in the early 90s. But what a mess. Now, eventually, the Big Bass Record Club folded, I want to say in about 2005, because they just couldn't generate enough memberships to continue to pay for the policy. But it was an interesting time. And I think that's one of the reasons, Tyler, why the chase and the romance of going after big fish has slowed down so much. There just isn't the money being referenced and thrown around and promised like there used to be.
If you caught the world record at this point, it's not like you would be handed any money or anything from anywhere, right? Correct? I mean, it would more or less be like how you kind of utilized it via, maybe a podcast interview or, going on the news and getting paid. Like that's probably the only financial gain that you would get from it. Is that right?
I think you're exactly right. I think that, I look at what Manabu Kurita did. He tied the world record at the time. Now he's got the Florida bass record, but he did everything right to catch the fish. He did everything wrong to market the fish. He caught it in Japan. Mistake. Can't blame him for it, but that's the wrong place to catch the world record. He caught it on live bait. Mistake.
Yeah.
He caught it on products, a lot of depths products and stuff like that. You can't even buy in the United States. That's not good. So he doesn't speak English. He's a perfectly charming guy. I really like Manabu. I've had a chance to meet with him several times, and just a terrific guy. But if you want to minimize how much money you make on a record fish, follow that path. What you really want to do is you want to go out and you want to catch it on public water. You want to catch it on an artificial bait manufactured by a large company. You don't want to tell anybody what you caught it on. Not right away. You don't want to let anybody take a lot of pictures of it. Not right away. You take your own pictures and take 1 million of them. You don't want to tell anybody about the rod, reel, line, or lure, or the boat, or what underwear you're wearing. Not right away. And then you want to go and you want to work with these companies.
Yeah.
To see how much they will offer you to help promote them. I would catch that bass on a prototype lure of my own design.
Yeah.
Which I would then sell to the highest bidder as Ken's world record catcher.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're spot on right. Now, if you could keep the fish alive, somebody like Johnny Morris might pay a lot of money for it.
Ooh.
Oh, that is true.
I never thought about that. That would be actually really cool to go. Like I would drive across the country to go look at the world record bass in a Bass Pro Shops tank.
Oh, absolutely.
There you
Absolutely,
go.
right?
Absolutely. Did Manabu did he gain any fame in Japan as much as the news spread through the US? And it was, I still remember the Bassmaster cover of him holding it and just with his sunglasses and all that, just
Bass paid big. I worked for BASS at the time. We paid big money for that picture. I say big money, pretty big money.
Yeah.
And yeah, he gained some fame. He's still got a very popular YouTube channel and presence in Japan, and people still pay him to promote products and stuff like that. But we're talking about a country of over 100 million people, but not that many bass fishermen. I'll tell you, if you guys ever have a chance to go to Japan, maybe you've been, but if you haven't and have a chance to go, do it. You will learn very quickly that if you want to be a bass fisherman in Japan, you got to want it really bad. Because the stuff that we're accustomed to paying a few dollars for because they're domestic, they're paying the import prices on. And the stuff we buy that's Japanese and we're accustomed to paying high prices on, they're still high over there too. And there's not a lot of bass water in Japan relative to what we have here. And it's hard to be a bass fisherman in Japan.
Yeah.
Those guys sacrifice.
I have watched quite a bit of YouTube videos of, I don't understand the lick of the English, but it's fishing. So, but I know that a lot of those guys over there, like they bank fish too. Just like you said, it's not like there's lakes all over the country where you can just go catch bass. It's a lot of them are fishing streams and things like that.
And a lot of them are, as you say, fishing from the bank. A lot of them are fishing from small John boats. And some of the water they have is big. Biwa is the size of Toledo Bend. Biwa is like 175,000 acres.
Wow.
But most of their waters are much, much smaller. And when they have a bass tournament there, they might have 500 or 600 boats. It's crazy.
Oh, wow. At Biwa?
The people who do bass fish there are rabid about it.
That's crazy.
So is where Biwa is located, would you consider it to be like a Gunnersville where it's just a big fishing community, or?
I would not. Biwa is on about the same latitude as, say, Atlanta or Gunnersville, basically. So they have about a similar climate. And Biwa is a massive natural lake. It's considered to be one of the oldest lakes in the world. And although fishing is a vital component of the Japanese culture, it's mostly saltwater. And the people who are there, parts of it are focused on freshwater fishing, but and a lot of it is bass, but not like you'd see in the U.S. Because it's an enemy fish. Where's my little enemy fish thing? Somewhere around here. Oh, it's up high there. I've got a little Japanese. It's a bass, and it's got the red circle and slash through it, and it came from Japan.
Well, I just, we're talking about not only records here, but we kind of gotten into just industry things as well. And I have to ask you, there's been, I feel like maybe obviously there's been electronics changes over the last couple of years within bass fishing that has created drama, but just bass fishing in general over probably the last 20 years has changed. Well, really, I guess 30 years, but it has changed a lot. And I just like, when do you think the heyday of bass fishing was? And do you think we'll ever, because I feel like it was kind of like maybe early 2000s or like, when there was a lot of money, like the Walmarts when they were in it. But when do you think it was? And also, do you think we'll ever get back?
Tough question. I think the heyday of bass fishing as a tournament sport, as a, where people are following a tournament trail, that kind of thing, was, and also for sponsors. I think the heyday was the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh.
This year in the U.S., they will sell approximately maybe 8,000 bass boats, fiberglass boats with a trailer, a motor over 100 horsepower. They'll sell maybe 8,000 of those, okay? Mm-hmm. In the late 80s and early 90s, they would sell 35 to 50,000 of those.
Oh.
There are Well, from 1991 until COVID, the number of anglers in the U.S., not just bass anglers, but the number of anglers in the U.S. fell. Not fell relative to population growth. I mean fell. There were fewer anglers in 2019 than there were in 1991. That's not good. We peaked in terms of number of anglers in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. There were a lot more anglers then than there are today. A lot more.
Yeah.
What's more is more of those anglers identified as bass anglers. These are all based, this is not my opinion. This is all based on studies that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service do every 5 years. The reason I point to 1991 is they were doing it every 5 years at that point. 91, 96, 2001, 2006. They got a little off their schedule due to COVID. So I think they had one in 2022. They'll do another one in a couple of years. But the number of people who identify as bass anglers has diminished. Back in the 50s, you would have 18, 19, 20% of your licensed anglers saying, I am a bass angler. We're down below 11% now.
Oh, wow.
When these people, and I've said this too many times, I'm sure folks are tired of me saying it, but when I see this 20-year-old kid hop up on the stage of a big tournament and say, bass fishing's never been bigger, you're an idiot. You're a moron. You don't know what you're talking about. Get off the stage. I hate that. I hate people thinking that because they see more people at their ramp and they're getting into the sport, they think it's as big as it's ever been. That's simply not true. And ironically, we had less water then than we do now. If you think about it, one weird thing about the fishing world is there is more bass fishing water today than there has ever been at any time on the planet, because we build reservoirs, because we improve water quality. And there are more places to go and catch a bass today than there have ever been. So we should be in a heyday of the sport. We are not. We're not. And I think that a big problem for that is that we are not. Bass fishing and fishing in general is a sport you learn from parents and family and close family friends. 90% of the people who buy a fishing license this year will have started fishing before they were 12 years old. Where is there a program for people under 12 years old? Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. BASS, MLF, those organizations abandoned that audience in the 80s and 90s, abandoned them. We lost 2 generations of anglers because there was no effort to pick them up, show them the way.
Yeah. So if you owned bass or major league fishing, would that be a big change that you would make?
That would be a big change I would make, simply because I would want to survive as an organization. So I would start trying to stoke that fire and create that pipeline of new anglers and new members. Now, those organizations think they're doing it with their high school and college programs, but I maintain, well, 2 things. One, that's too late. If you want these people to get into fishing, you better get them at 12 or earlier. That's what all the stats tell us. And number 2, high school and college programs are not growing the sport at all. There is 0 evidence that they're growing the sport at all.
Really?
What they're doing is they're taking the kids of the dads who have bass boats and putting them on the water.
Yeah.
They're selling a pipe dream that, hey, if you come out and fish these tournaments and join the college club, you're going to be the next Kevin Van Dam. And very few guys achieve that. And the ones who don't achieve it, they not only quit bass tournament fishing, they quit fishing.
Really?
Those people give it up. They get jobs. They go into the workforce and they forget fishing, because for them, fishing was just about competition. And now that they can't run all around the country because they have work and family, they give it up. I've talked to so many people who did that. I've talked to so many high school coaches, because people need to remember, bass fishing at the college and high school level is not a sport. It is a club. It is not a sport. It is not monitored by the NCAA. If the NCAA if they try to make bass fishing an NCAA sport, the NCAA would rain down on them like fire. These shirts that say University of whatever and have all these sponsors on it, that would disappear.
Yeah.
Because that would be wildly against their regs.
Yeah.
People might even go to prison. It's so dirty. It's so dirty.
Well, I know that I mean, we live in Ohio, like Ohio State. Like I was on the Ohio State Bass Fishing Club, like you said, but we know people who have, and even CJ with his line of work, like he's had licenses through Ohio State to produce product, and the like what they have to go through to even get that. And if anyone tries to come on the outside, and even if it's like a color combo, like they will come after you big time.
Oh yeah.
So I can only imagine.
You do not. Bass fishing will never be a college sport.
Yeah.
Never. It will never get there. I keep hearing these stories about, oh, he got a full ride to go to this school on the bass fishing team. Really? Who's paying for that? I doubt the university's paying for that. That must be some big donor on the side, because I doubt that the school is actually doing that. I want to see where those checks are coming from. I want to see where that money's going, because that tells the whole story. But I've talked to a lot of high school coaches, guys, and one thing that I find nauseating is comes time in high school and you got to pick which club you're in. And the guy's saying, well, I don't play chess. I'm not going to join the chess team, and I'm not into music, so I'm not going to do the glee club, and I'm not great at math, so I'm not going to be a mathlete. Maybe I'll try fishing. And so he goes out and he joins the fishing club. And he quickly finds out it's all about competition and not about just hanging out and going fishing. And he realizes that he doesn't have tens of thousands of dollars in rods and reels and baits. And Daddy doesn't have a bass boat. So he's got to get in the boat with Junior over here, who's going to back end him all day. And after about a week, he says, this is not for me. And he never goes fishing again. That is what is happening to a massive part of those high school fishing groups.
And that's not what fishing's about.
Yeah.
Like,
it's not.
I mean, just go out, and you don't have to compete with it. There's nothing more fun than sitting at a pond watching a bobber. Just doop, doop, doop. Like, I love it. Taking my nieces and nephews out to the pond. That's what fishing's all about.
Yeah.
If you want to get into the competitive sector of it, do it. But growing up in our youth clubs, there is a massive divide between kids who just wanted to fish and the competitive kids. And there was just this separation of it. And I saw it happen. And I mean, but my gosh, just go fishing with Dad or Pete Paul or whoever you want to, just enjoy your time outdoors.
I'm with you.
That's I thought it was pretty interesting about what you said about the bass boat thing too, because I just talked to a gentleman today about my bass boat, that he was wanting to buy it, and one of the biggest things that he was saying is like he has a boy that's getting into fishing, and that he wants to be able to get him out there and on it. And so it is interesting, because I do feel like that has happened way more. Like, I don't know, we're 35. So like, I feel like, we both competitively fished for probably 18 years, even before forward facing sonar stuff. But I just feel like back in our day, like it was hard to get a bass boat. Like my dad was just like, like I'm not paying for that. You're going to have to do it on your own. I worked at Target pushing carts, trying to get a bass boat, or always made us work to get it, And so when it comes to tournament fishing in general, what I guess with there being now really kind of, there's two main leagues with the MLF and Bass, but the NPFL has really risen, and they're the ones that banned forward facing sonar this year. So I think that obviously gives them an edge. But is it like, I think about when Bass split, or when they went to, a lot of guys went, like it was all about the, what Boyd Duckett would say, and if they could raise, what would he say? Something about the tides and all boats would rise with it or whatever. But I also wonder, like, I just don't know if bass fishing will ever get to a place where guys are making $1 million like in tournament winnings, if that makes sense. Like, I just don't think it'll ever be there. Like we saw a little bit in the early 2000s with the Walmarts, I feel like, and whatnot. But I don't know. I feel like too many industries now have tried dipping their toes in bass fishing. They see what it's at. They see the actual demographic, how many people are there, and they're just like, nah, not for us. Like, can't get what they want in it. And now so many people have done it. I don't know that a Nike or a huge company is ever going to come in and say, hey, we want to be in this space. Let's put a lot of money into it. Like, I just don't think it'll ever be there. But what do you think?
Well, the challenge bass fishing has had for a long, long time is we don't reach 1 million people. We like to say, oh, there are 50 million anglers out there. Well, that doesn't mean there are 50 million anglers who have the same level of equipment and interest of a Kevin Van Dam. The number of anglers who actually have a serious interest at that level is in the thousands, not the millions. And the biggest audiences that I've ever known about watching a bass fishing television program or watching a Bassmaster Classic online is maybe 500,000. And if you can't reach 1 million, you can't interest Nike or a major auto company or a pharmaceutical company or Target, or something like that. You can't get there. They're not interested. You got to hit 1 million, or they're just not going to play the big non-endemics. And there's an interesting problem here. BASS has about 520,000 members. That's a meaningful number. Okay, that number means something. Notice that number is safely above 500,000. That means that when that Bassmaster magazine goes out, it's going out to 520,000 homes, over 500,000 homes, but less than 1 million, less than 750,000. That's a sweet spot. If they could get that subscription level up to 1 million, they might be able to introduce a few non-endemics to advertising in that magazine, because now you're reaching 7 figures. But you would lose most of your endemics. Most of your endemics can't afford the postage, the ink, the paper that it would cost to produce a magazine that goes out to 1 million people. That 520 is maintained for a reason. People don't understand that who don't work in the publishing industry. You say, well, I wish bass was 2 million. Well, you'd never see another lure ad in Bassmaster magazine if it was 2 million. They couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
But you would see Toyota and, Kmart or Walmart rather, and stuff like that. So it's maintained artificially. It's maintained through churn. About 40 or 45% of all the people who are Bass members this year will not be Bass members next year.
Oh, wow.
They'll recreate that group. They'll churn that group through direct mail, email, stuff like that. And it's not just them. It's most any membership type fishing organization. There's a lot of churn. And so that's an interesting thing, I think, to keep in mind about that audience. Because when you say, oh, I wish Bass would have 1 million members, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
That would hurt in a lot of ways. I don't see bass fishing reaching those kind of NASCAR levels and stuff like that. And I used to think it had a chance. Now I don't. I think it's a niche sport. I think that, but that doesn't make it bad. It's still my favorite sport. I think we need to find ways to elevate the best people in the sport, to show off their talents. Because right now, the average guy sitting in his lazy boy on Saturday morning watching fishing shows thinks he could do it if he had the same tow vehicle and the same equipment. And he can't. He's not that good.
Yeah.
Maybe he could get that good if he made the same sacrifices that these anglers made, but he ain't there now. And I used to, when I worked at Bass, I used to advocate for, hey, we need a skills competition. We got to have an equivalent of the slam dunk competition or the 3-point shooting or the home run derby or, something like that. And I could never get buy-in, but I still think that would be a good way to show people that these guys are special and super talented.
Yeah, that's actually interesting you said that, just because for probably 2 years I've had the idea of doing almost a skill competition like that amongst bass anglers, where it's a casting thing, then you got to go catch a bass, then you got to run across the lake as fast as you can. I think it would make for a really cool YouTube video, but I don't, like you said, I don't know that an organization or one of these organizations would get on par to do something like that. Maybe
they should, but I don't know that they will. I mean, I've been advocating that for 25 years now. The buy-in would have to come from sponsors and manufacturers. Like, one of the things I wanted to do was have like a trick casting contest, an accuracy casting contest, a distance casting contest. And for that, you'd need buy-in from the rod, reel, and line manufacturers. And you'd have rules. I'd say, okay, if the rod's not legal in tournament competition, then you can't do it. If the line doesn't test at least 10 pounds, then you can't use it, and stuff like that. But what would happen is some reel company would dominate for a while, then everybody else would back out, and it would probably go away.
Yeah.
Because our industry is weak financially and other ways too. It's weak. It's challenged. Money is super tight right now, and there's a lot of timidity out there because people are afraid of the economy, afraid of tariffs and things like that.
Yeah. I got to ask you, and I don't know if you want to answer this question, so feel free to say no. And you may not know at all, but I personally, especially lately, I've really wondered, for example, like Bassmaster. I'd be so curious to know their books and like revenue that they bring in. Because I have thought in my mind, like I never thought it would be really, really high, but then I've talked to some anglers who that are Elite Series pros that think that it's very high, and that, to pay what they paid out last year, I think it was maybe 5 or 6 million or something like that. Do you think that Bass has the revenue coming in themselves that if they were just to direct it a little bit different, that you could have anglers that aren't paying any entries and actually making kind of what they did maybe a few years ago when it was, 10,000 to 50th and so on and so forth?
No, I don't think you could do that. These guys have fished for their own money since Ray Scott held his first tournament in 1967, and I don't see a way that's going to change in a significant manner. Interesting you mentioned that, because in 1967, Ray Scott put on his first tournament. It was before he created BASS. It was called the All-American. It was on Beaver Lake in Arkansas, and he charged $100 to enter. He had 106 entries. First place was basically $2,000. So you have a 20-to-1 ratio between first place and your entry fee, 20-to-1. Elite Series had a tournament a few weeks ago. 100,000 first place, basically $5,000 entry fee, a little more, 20-to-1. Nothing has changed. You want $1 million tournament? I'll give you $1 million tournament. The entry fee is $50,000.
Yeah.
Just that simple.
Yeah.
Just that simple.
Yeah.
But people think these organizations are just killing it, and I don't believe that. I don't believe they're killing it. Mm-hmm. I believe it's a challenge every day. I'll give you more ugly stats. I love ugly stats, guys. Sorry about that. If you add up all the money ever paid out in the Bassmaster Classic, and the first Classic was in 1971. If you add up all the money that has been paid out, not just first place, but every place, from 1971 until this year, and you lumped it all together, it would be less than the 40th place NFL player makes in a season.
Yeah. That's actually a super interesting.
It would be a tiny fraction of what Shohei Ohtani makes.
Oh my gosh.
Tiny fraction of that.
Yeah. So we need
less than half.
We need a really good baseball player who wants to just give money away.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. Now you're talking. Well, it's another interesting point because, what was it, 15, 18 years ago, you had some movies and television shows coming out like The Walking Dead and the Hunger Games stuff. And in each of those shows, there was a focus on archery, crossbows, primitive recurve bows, even compound bows. And that created a boom in the archery world. And it just so happened one day that I'm on an airplane. Can't even remember now where I was going or what I was coming from, but I'm on an airplane And I'm sitting next to the guy who happened to be president at the time of the National Archery Association, whatever it may be called. And we got to talking because we're two outdoor industry guys, and we got to talking. And he's telling me about this windfall. He says, we now have tens of thousands of people interested in archery who have never been interested in archery before. And they have no desire to kill a deer or a chipmunk or anything else. They want to shoot a zombie. and they're 9-year-old girls, a lot of them. And he says, we have no frickin' idea how to keep them. No idea whatsoever. And now, years later, I see they didn't keep them. All the archery shops I saw open up back then have closed. Every one of them that I saw. And they weren't able to capture that magic and figure out how to stay ahead of that curve. And to your point, finding a baseball player who wants to fund it, or finding a movie that celebrates bass fishing in a significant way and drives an audience to our sport. I wonder if we could keep them.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like, is it, even if it happened, it wouldn't be worth it almost.
Well, with the archery thing is the bottom line is we just didn't have enough zombies.
Yeah.
I don't know, CJ. Have you been to a weigh-in recently?
Oh. Well,
have you been to a Bassmaster Classic? Come on.
Oh yeah.
Have you been to
Come
Walmart?
on, the Classic Expo.
Yeah, been to Walmart.
There's some zombies. There's some zombies at the Classic Expo.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, this has been super interesting. I mean, I feel like we could just talk about this stuff for hours. But I gotta ask you: is there anything else that's just been on your mind when it comes to the fishing industry? When it comes to anything like that you just want to get off? Recently you've been more of the interviewer, So to be the interviewee, is there anything that you got?
I'm working on an essay. I guess most of the things I've written in the last 15 years of my writing career have been classified as essays. They've been my analysis of something or my opinion on something, and I enjoy that. I'm working on an essay right now that focuses on establishing what I would call the rules of fair chase for fishing. Are you guys hunters?
No.
No,
but I know about what you're saying.
Yeah, in hunting, there's a thing called the rules of fair chase. It was established by the Boone and Crockett Club well over 100 years ago, and it's kind of these ethical principles about the taking of wild game. Mm-hmm. And they range from things like, you don't take it and waste it, to things like, you don't drug the animal before you kill it, you don't capture the animal before you kill it, things like that. And those rules have evolved over time as technology has evolved. And one of the rules that popped up some years ago was you can't use a drone to kill a wild animal and to get credit for a record. And Boone and Crockett and the Pope and Young Club, they're all about records. Boone and Crockett does guns, Pope and Young does bow and arrow. And you can't use a drone. They said that's against the rules of fair chase. And that's also against the rules in most states' hunting regulations. Well, what is forward-facing sonar but a drone? It's live. I'm able to watch that animal in real time and pursue that animal in real time. Why is that okay in fishing but not okay in hunting? I never dreamed I would be against technology. I've always been pro-technology. Let's see where it goes. There's more to it than that. And I was not against forward-facing sonar at all for years. But then two things happened that caused me to rethink that. I keep a lot of statistics on the sport of bass fishing, and one thing I've always kept track of is the catch rates in the Bassmaster Elite Series. I was at Bass when the Elite Series started. I was at Bass for many years after that. I keep these meticulous records on each tournament. And I can tell you that from 2006, when the Elite Series started, until 2018, when the league split and 68 Elite Series anglers went to the BPT, that the best guy at catching fish and bringing a lot of fish to the scales every day was Aaron Martins. he brought 4.815 bass to the scales every day on average, which is the best. Last year, the Bassmaster Elite Series as a whole was better than that.
Interesting.
And let me assure you that the Bassmaster Elite Series field as a whole is not better than Aaron Martin's
Yeah,
in his prime. They are not.
I agree.
But they got a box.
I agree. Well, I got to ask you.
A box with a drone.
Yeah, I gotta ask you. When it comes to forward-facing sonar, I feel like I'm dead in the middle because I love watching like traditional bass fishing primarily. Like I cannot say that I do love fishing and using forward-facing sonar, but watching it's not as good as it could be if Bass and MLF did a little bit more to it. But when it comes to that, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what you're saying. I just want to play devil's advocate for a minute.
Oh, sure.
When it comes to the Aaron Martins thing, and this can be, I want to hear your input because I just want to know. So when it comes to Aaron Martins, do you think that those numbers at all are skewed? One, because they go to the same lakes all the time when it comes to bass, like they know a lot of things that are going down on certain lakes. And also, do you think that it has anything to do with, I don't think that there's many anglers that were as good as Aaron Martins was at, like, especially in his prime. But do you think that anglers as a whole are better at just catching 5 fish and that they can go to a lake and catch them, like, kind of like other sports where, a guy playing football these days versus in 1972, like they're just better these days, whatever it may be. So I just want to know what your thought is on that.
Well, I don't have any evidence that guys have gotten significantly better at catching fish if you take that technology away. All the evidence indicates otherwise, that the catch rates are pretty static. In fact, they vary more based upon your location and timing than anything else. If you have tournaments on the Ohio River and Table Rock and the Sabine River, your catch rates are going to suck. They're just going to suck because those fisheries are tough. If you have all your tournaments on Amistad and Falcon and Norman and Hartwell, where fish are easy to catch, your catch rates are going to soar. But there's no evidence to indicate that it's anything other than the technology. The other thing that happened that I think is significant is, and I bet you guys would agree with this, for years and years and years, the single greatest key to being a successful angler was time on the water. You could ask most anybody who you would consider a really skilled angler and ask them, hey, what's the key to your success? And they would tell you time on the water. It's probably been your situation as well. That's gone now, because we have guys who are dominating now, who are doing super, super well, irrespective of their young age. We have guys who are 20, 21, 23 years old who are dominating, and they don't have anything like the same level of time on the water. They're not putting together a pattern the way guys used to, and the way you used to when you got started in the sport. They're not dissecting the water in the same way. Many of them, to a great degree, are going out somewhere in the lake, wherever they think is going to have a high population of fish, dropping the trolling motor in the water and scanning, and sweeping and scanning, and they're making fewer casts than ever before, but their casts are spending more time in front of a fish than ever before. And yeah, that's efficiency and good for them, but it's not the same thing as learning the habits of the fish. It's not the same thing as learning the biological patterns of the fish, and it's not the same thing as breaking down the conditions like people used to in the past.
Yeah, no, I think that I remember just because I fished the Bassmaster Opens for a number of years, and I always remember, I think I had heard it, I don't know, on a podcast, maybe it was even you actually, that had said something about the average age of anglers who were in their prime, and I think that it was like low 40s or something like that. Back before forward facing. Yeah. But it does seem, it's obvious these days that guys that can jump into it and that are winning, and they're 19 and they're 20 and they're 21. I mean, last fall we got whooped by a 17-year-old a few times, several times on a lake that we have put, both of us have put a tremendous amount of time on, and we use forward-facing technology on it, but we fished it so far before forward-facing sonar that we learned a lot about putting those patterns together, what the fish are doing. And so I think that forward-facing sonar only helps, but here's an angler who hadn't spent a whole lot of time on that lake, and he, like, I mean, 2 tournaments in a row, basically, were just, I mean, whooping on us bad. So,
But that's the
and that happens too. There are plenty of times where a guy who's never seen the lake before goes out there and dominates in 3 feet of water throwing a spinnerbait. More power to him. That's wonderful. I don't begrudge the guys who are great with forward-facing sonar. I appreciate that they put time in on it. I appreciate that they're talented with it. That is not cheating. Anybody who calls it cheating is an idiot. We know who we're talking about here. He's just an idiot to say that, because it's not cheating. It's not against the rules. That's not the way I prefer to watch fishing, and I do think it violates the basic principles of fair chase. So I find myself surprisingly, unpredictably, and somewhat uncomfortably thinking that there's a moral issue with that technology. But bass fishing is not going to change that. What might get it changed, if it changes, it'll change at a state level. You might see some state agencies come out and ban it because it's devastating to populations of crappie and muskie and pike. You guys are in some territory where there's a lot of muskies, and you know how it used to be. It's the fish of 10,000 casts, right? It's now the fish of one cast. One cast. You find that fish, you bomb a bait on him, he eats it. They're aggressive. One cast. Instead of catching a muskie every 5 trips, I know guides who are catching 10 muskies a trip.
wow.
That's what's going to kill forward-facing sonar on a state agency basis.
Interesting.
Bass fishing's not going to do it. You know why? Because when we catch a bass, we put it right back in the water. Not true of crappie.
Yeah.
And a lot of those muskie won't make it. So that's an issue.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see if, because I would imagine if a state does like any kind of ban, it'll be a process, right? It'll probably be a 4, 5, 6 year process where they go through and do their due diligence, or do you think they'll just, because they always got to fund a study, I feel like, from what I've heard, they got to fund different studies to be able to see, we have, this evidence that it's doing this. I don't know. Maybe you know that better, though.
I think you're exactly right. And a lot of the funding for some of these state studies are provided by endemic fishing companies. And guess what? The companies that make that technology are not going to fund these studies. They're not going to be happy about these studies. They're going to come up with studies of their own, which contradict that. And it's going to be difficult to find the money to do those studies anyway. They're not going to be high priority studies. So it may be a long time if forward facing is restricted at all. But I do think there are moral fair chase issues about it, and I hope they're addressed on some sort of state level, because I think about how many times the world record bass might have been broken in the 70s, 80s, and 90s if that technology had been available then. It would have been broken all the time.
Probably some 27-pound bass swimming around back then.
caught by a high school.
We'd find out.
Yeah.
And that fascinates me.
Yeah.
I mean, I want that technology on my boat. I just don't want anybody else's. I don't trust it.
Oh, man, that's great. Well, Ken, it has been awesome having you on. I would love to do this again about another subject. This has been really cool. Your brain and your just love and passion for bass fishing is untouched, really. I mean, there's no one else that keeps the records that you do, and it's not like you're getting paid to do any of this. It is literally just for fun and just for the love of it. So it's awesome.
Well, Tyler, CJ, thank you guys so much. It's an honor to be on Bass Juice, and I apologize for running my mouth so much, but really had a good time.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you, and
Alrighty.
till the next time. Well, what an awesome episode that was. If you guys would like to check out more Bass Shoes podcasts, I'm going to leave the link for the playlist right up here. Also, there's a link right down here for fin fishing if you would like to help support this channel a little bit further. All right, I will see you guys in the next one.